Sunday night edition of the Crash the Pond podcast. Folks, it's kind of a sad day, a happy day. I don't know
Bit
where your emotions are.
it's bittersweet. It's bittersweet, you know? I mean, I think for a lot of Ducks fans out there, this is going to be a bit of a. I think bittersweet's the best way to put it because we started to see some strides taken as they finally put Trevor Zegras in his proper position and let him play, and you started to see the benefits from that and how much fun it could be. But I think for also Ducks fans out there, there's a little bit of the light at the end of the tunnel with the season being over now. The Ducks are officially locked into the second worst position in the league, which means the second best draft odds. And which here's the critical aspect of that. They will have either the first, second, third, or fourth pick. That is where they will end up. They cannot be in any other spot outside of that. And so the Ducks are going to end up getting a good player. And so if you want the kind of sweet aspect of it, it's the fact that the Ducks are going to now be locked into having a good player coming into the system and potentially onto the team next year. And so overall, it's sad that the season's over. Obviously, it was not the best season ever. It was actually, looking at the numbers, it was the worst season in Ducks franchise history from a points percentage aspect. So that's fun. That's a fun little note for everyone out there. But there is a little bit of a light at the end of the tunnel that we started to see at the end of this season.
Yeah, so what we're going to do on this show, and as Jake just kind of showed, we're chomping at the bit to talk about the season, to try to unpack it all, as Jake's cat Salem is just climbing through the window over there.
Yep. No one else can see it but you. That part of the camera is cut off.
Yeah, I get the secret feed here, the in arena feed. No, but so with the season being over, it's obviously still very fresh. I mean, the last game of the season was last night, Ducks losing in overtime. I don't think we're going to do the usual like game recaps from the week, but we're just going to look back on the season, a season in review, try to figure out what went wrong, where we went wrong in our evaluation, kind of look at the positives to take away, the things that need to change, they need to improve drastically. We don't have a huge structure for this, but I think we're gonna give it a shot. I think this has been kind of
And
bubbling up for a while now.
and I think a lot of people have their own questions for that they want answered for this
Yes.
season. And so I think that this is going to kind of be us looking back on the season kind of in a little bit of a fresh manner. The season obviously just ended, so there's a lot of things kind of that you and I haven't necessarily been able to do our deep dive that we sometimes do after the year. And so it's going to kind of be our fresh thoughts on the year, what's
Yeah,
happened.
exactly. This is going to be like our instant, almost instant reaction, just
Yeah.
right, like kind of raw, maybe even a little
And
unfiltered.
And so to kind of refresh everyone's memories out there, and so we'll get into questions and have a lot of kind of that coming. So if you're in the Twitch chat, we will get to you, and we'll probably try to do a lot of the show for that. But for those of you out there listening to this, if you're new listening or anything like that, kind of where both of us had this Ducks team to start the year, to refresh everyone's memory, is that you and I both kind of predicted that this team would finish fifth in the division. That was
Yeah,
kind of
so
where we saw them at. We expected them to probably be better than the Sharks, than the Kings, than the Coyotes, and finish fifth ahead of those three teams. And obviously, as you all know now, that did not happen. So I think kind of going into where we went wrong there would be a good idea. So if you want to start there.
okay.
I'm
Well,
just throwing at you. I'm throwing you under the bus completely right now.
I love that
Although
you say.
I have a
I,
good
lo-
answer also for it. I can get into mine if you want.
I just love that you said if you want, as if there's actually a choice that I can make here of not doing
Yeah,
it.
you don't get a choice.
Yeah, well, no, but I think that's a healthy place to start, because if we rewind to back in January, December, when we knew what the season was going to look like, the divisions, we knew that this team hadn't played in a year. It was looking like, okay, look at the roster, see what the pieces they have are. We knew that they added Kevin Shattenkirk. We figured that there would be some internal improvement from the youngsters. We thought, hey, year two of Dallas Aikens, maybe the systems that he's looking to implement will be more set in stone. We also thought, hey, John Gibson coming off a difficult year, but assuming that he just bounces back mildly, he should be a positive for this team. I was also high on them bringing back Ryan Miller. I thought that was a good idea as their backup goaltender. So that was the starting point, is that, hey, this team is probably not going to be an elite team. No one was saying that, but there was at least some optimism that they could be a team that hung around until the last few weeks of the season. And I think fifth, and we even talked about them maybe finishing sixth, but it felt like that was a reasonable range. I don't think that neither of us were high enough on them to really say confidently that they would be in the playoff picture, that they would be fourth, but a team that could maybe put up a fight felt like it felt like the logical place. Maybe we were too optimistic though.
And one thing I want just to toot our own horns, we did have the Wild, both of us finishing third in the division, so I'm pretty happy with that one. But yeah, so to kind of jump in, I think that the big miss from both you and I on this season, kind of coming into it, was John Gibson. I think you and I both expected John Gibson to have a bounce back year after last year, putting up a .904 save percentage. His GSAX was also below par. I think it was his worst GSAX season. And I'll get the numbers for you in 1 second, but his worst GSAX season over the course of his career. And so I think that kind of having that bad season, the fact that he had nearly 10 months off, the fact that he was going to be well rested coming into the season, that basically it was all setting up for John Gibson to have a bit of a monster season. And the thing is, it started out that way. And it started out with him being really hot. And then kind of basically after that first month of the season, it kind of really took a turn for the worse. And he really started falling off. And I think that's honestly the biggest miss, because I think both you and I didn't expect this Ducks team to necessarily blow the doors off of teams, to be this high event hockey that they control play, they control expected goals. But if they could be middle of the pack in terms of expected goals and have John Gibson behind them as a bit of a wall, kind of going back to where he was about 2 seasons ago, where he had a 26.9 GSAX season, they could be in decent shape. And I mean, he had a negative 4.81 GSAX in 35 games this season, .903 save percentage. And so I think the fact that they got not only replacement level, but sub-replacement level goaltending from both him and Ryan Miller throughout the course of the season, I think that is the biggest thing, or the biggest thing to point to, or the easiest thing to point to as to where things went wrong, where things started going wrong. And that was basically right after that first month of the season.
Yeah, with John Gibson, I think one thing that's important to note is that, like you said, it felt like these were all the right circumstances for him to perform well, because we had always harped on in the past of, he doesn't get to rest enough. He doesn't get to have enough time between starts. The Ducks have not really tapped into their backup goalie enough. And so with all those months off, it felt like this was going to be a perfect storm for him. And instead it was kind of the opposite, maybe the compressed schedule. I will say, though, that you did bring up his goal save, though, expected, and he finished the season at minus 4.8, 4.81.
Mm-hmm.
And that's actually a big improvement from where he was a few weeks ago. Like, he actually did play better down the stretch. He had one. So the way it started is, as everyone knew, he had the fantastic start, that series against Vegas, where he was just standing on his head, and then just this massive valley where he was bad. I mean,
there's no other way to put it.
And, this isn't a commentary on chicken or the egg. Is it the team, or is it the, how he's been used, or the status of the franchise? This is just an objective assessment that he was not good. Not only was he not the John Gibson that we had come to know in the past, he wasn't even, like you said, a replacement level goalie. So given how poor of goaltending the Ducks got for the grand majority of the season, even if they had the improvements that we thought they were going to get from other parts of the roster, that severely undercuts a lot of what you can do when you're not getting the saves. And again, I don't want people to take this as we're pinning all of this on John Gibson or goaltending. It's just the first thing we're bringing up, but trust me, there's a lot more here. But this is one of the components that we probably overestimated. Maybe we didn't even overestimate, but regardless, it did not come through for this team.
Yep. And then I think the other kind of big aspect outside of goaltending where things kind of went wrong is the optimization of the lineup. And I think this is a thing that you and I have harped on a lot this season, and it was how Dallas Eakins, and I think that this goes to kind of the other thing that you and I expected, that maybe Dallas Eakins with the second year with the team would get his foothold with the team. Maybe last year was more of a small sample size, maybe first season with the team, a lot of things there. Second season, he's had a full off season to really put together his coaching plan, put together his plan of attack for the team. And he really kind of put the team behind the 8 ball for most of the season by consistently rolling out lineups that were suboptimal, by refusing to play David Backes and instead playing Derek Grant. And who knows if maybe his hands were tied, but we can only really assess the coaching staff for the decisions that were made and the lineups that were put out there. And at the end of the day, the lineups that were put out there on most nights were suboptimal. You had Jamie Drysdale playing on his offside, which clearly did not work for essentially half of the games that Jamie Drysdale played in.
Well, and also that was after the season had already been decided. Like there were,
True.
I think the things to point to are in the beginning of the year.
That's fair.
Like for example, right off the bat, Isaac Lindstrom on the wing with Ryan Getzlaf
scratching Troy Terry. Terry, who became the fifth leading point getter for the team this season, scratching Adam Henrique at one point in time. When at the end of the day, no matter what you want to say about Adam Henrique and all the different things,
he's still one of your best options in the team. And regardless of, because a lot of people will push back and say, well, he's one of the veterans, he's getting paid a lot, and you gotta put up some accountability for lack of performance. And it's like, sure, that's well and good, but this team with very few options down the middle, quality NHL options, there's some up and coming talent, but you can't just dive into that narrative street and wave guys, scratch guys just because of things like that. If you want to enforce accountability, do it in other ways, but you are not a team that has the luxury of playing around like that.
And if you wanted to do that, like look at maybe scratching Derek Grant. How about that?
Well, that's the thing. And I think that to me, Derek Grant, and people give us a lot of crap for hating on Derek Grant, but
he was bad. He was bad like we expected.
We have nothing against him as the person or how he is as a teammate. It's just the simple fact that when he's on the ice, you can go down the list. Ducks get outshot, outchanced, expected goals go against them, get outscored. And so there's just no case. There's no objective case to make for Derek Grant as the kind of player that Dallas Eakins views him as, because the amount of minutes that not only Derek Grant played, but that he was taking away from players that were better than him, that was a huge issue when the season was still kind of hanging in the balance, when they still maybe had an opportunity to make the playoffs.
Just for funsies, I'm looking at the expected or the evolving hockey kind of totals for the entire Ducks team this year. And looking at the forwards, excluding Vinny Lettieri, who only played in 5 games, Nick Deslauriers and Derek Grant had the lowest expected goals for percentage on the team the entire year, with Derek Grant having the worst at 38.63 expected goals for percentage, Nick Deslauriers at 40.46. So basically right where they left off last year of being just black holes for the team in terms of expected goals for percentage, that's where they were yet again for this team. And it's not as if this is shocking. I mean, Derek Grant, let me just very quickly, for anyone that thinks that he is this defensive stalwart for the Ducks, that when he's on the ice, basically the Ducks limit all of these chances against. Once again, looking at all of the Ducks forwards from this year, excluding Vinny Lettieri, he allowed the most expected goals against per 60 minutes of ice time out of any forward for the Ducks, and didn't make up for it by at least generating expected goals for. So like, this isn't a situation where you could maybe say, okay, he's at 30% expected goals for, but he is at least limiting chances against and just not getting anything for it.
Yeah, like there's not like that one component that you can point to.
Yeah, exactly. Like he's bad. He's been bad, and the Ducks signed him to a 3-year deal, and it's just it was a bad decision. But getting back to kind of where we were wrong, the other thing is looking at some of the numbers, Sonny Milano getting hurt and missing majority of the season, only playing in 6 games. I think in the grand scheme of things, that did hurt the Ducks' outlook. And now, granted, who knows if Dallas Eakins would have ended up playing Sonny Milano, because as we kind of are still in this discussion.
To start the year, he wasn't in the lineup.
Yeah, so to continue this discussion about Dallas Eakins, he was scratching Troy Terry, he was scratching Sonny Milano, but looking at Sonny Milano's numbers in his small sample size, his expected goals for percentage was the best in the entire franchise.
And also just when he was on the ice, he was visibly a player who was going to contribute. Just the speed, the offensive game that he brought, it's just not something that this team had a lot of. And so that's why, when they weren't playing him, it felt so baffling because of what he can bring and what they don't have.
Yeah, and kind of on that same note, I guess, as we're now kind of discussing a little bit about the injuries, how much do you play into this Lindholm's injury?
So that is a narrative that I think the Ducks have really been kind of not hyping up, but it feels like it's been pushed
heavily from both the broadcasts, from whenever Bob Murray speaks, whenever Dallas Eakins speaks, they lament the amount of injuries that have been happening.
Yeah, they've really especially fallen back on the fact that they haven't had many games with Fowler, Lindholm, and Manson. And while that may be true, that didn't. I mean, look, no one's arguing that helped. Like, of course, losing Hampus Lindholm with the way this blue line is constructed does not help your chances. But it feels like losing one guy, should not have been a death knell. And then Josh Manson missed a bunch of games. Now, the reasons why he missed those games, I mean, getting hurt while fighting.
Two of them. Two of his injuries came from that.
It's not what you love to see. And so, but that being said, it feels like they had enough defensive depth to not be this elite, defensive group, but at least have like a level of competency. I mean, with Cam Fowler back there, with Kevin Shattenkirk, it felt like they could at least cobble something together. But instead, Dallas Eakins really fell back on the likes of Jacob Larson, Yanni Hakanpää getting really elevated, probably to a place he shouldn't have been. And I think Hakanpää probably acquitted himself well for what he was being asked to do. But overall, I think that there was a way around that. I think they probably should have played Josh Mahura more, for example. Cody Curran never even got a sniff. And
Josh Manson wasn't necessarily good either when he played. So that also kind of defunks that narrative of not having all three of those guys.
Well, exactly. And that's one thing that I wanted to get to, and I'm glad you brought that up, is that even if these guys were healthy, realistically, only two of those three were any good when they did play. I mean, Hampus Lindholm was great in the games that he did play. Cam Fowler is...
This may have been Cam Fowler's best season of his career.
Cam Fowler may be turning into an underrated player in my eyes. I think he
is.
I think he's underappreciated by some corners of the fan base or even just nationally.
Yeah.
Which is funny because I feel like at certain points he was overrated.
He was way overrated. And now, I mean, here's the thing. The issue with Cam Fowler is that he's not a guy that has put up the points this year. I mean, granted, he was third on the team in points with 23 points in 56 games.
But I just wanted to say he was good. Him and Lindholm were good, but Manson was just, if you look at all his stats, and even if you watched him play, like he struggled out there this year. He took a lot of penalties, and I feel like that's something that he doesn't get. It's not that I want him to get berated, but there are players on this team or in the past who have gotten kind of that tag of being a guy who takes a lot of penalties. And Josh Manson, that he never seems to get that kind of flack. And for example, Kevin Shattenkirk this year took a lot of penalties, deservedly got a lot of pushback on that, people really panning him. But Josh Manson, I mean, wasn't a saint in that regard. And it just seems like he kind of gets off scot-free. So he just didn't have a great season. He was very porous defensively. And so to me, that it just, so saying, oh, well, if only we had, I mean, Dallas Eakins even said, if we had all three of those guys, if we had a healthy lineup for more of the season, we would be in a much different place. Like, we're not just kind of, saying this stuff like just to guessing what these people are thinking. Dallas Eakins has actually verbalized this.
I mean, here's the thing. If they would have had Hampus Lindholm, I think undoubtedly you can say, yes, they probably would have had more wins. They would have
had a better chance. But
they would have had more wins, but where do they finish? Instead of finishing 8th in the division, they finish 7th, 6th, maybe?
Well, and here's the funny thing is that, so if you look year over year, and this gets, I think, probably to maybe the third component of where things went wrong, or, where our evaluation was wrong, is that if you look at the expected goals for and against per 60, which is kind of it's at 5-on-5, it's a stat that I like to look at for a team because it just gives you an idea of how well are they generating offense and how well are they defending, how well are they limiting shot quality the other way. So last season, Dallas Eakins' first year, the Ducks gave up 2.61 expected goals against per 60. And this year that actually went down to 2.5. So even without some of their top D-men, they still got a little better defensively. But from an offensive standpoint, expected goals for per 60, they went down from 2.32 to 2.08. They got worse offensively. And I don't know if the talent was that much worse or
the roster was pretty close to being the exact same.
The available talent was not that much worse. And I really do think that where a lot of this really crumbled for the Ducks is that they just couldn't generate offense. And it wasn't just a matter of, their lack of finishing, lack of production from certain guys. This was just a team-wide lack of offensive generation. And that to me does somewhat come down to coaching, because some of the guys who were being left out of the lineup consistently, especially in the beginning, were more of the offensive types, and they were being favored for the likes of Derek Grant, Nick Delorier, and that was just kind of a self-imposed restriction on this team.
Like, I mean, Troy Terry didn't play in all the games this year, and I think that he played in 48 games, so he didn't play in eight of the 56, and I think only maybe one or two of those would have been due to injury.
Mm-hmm.
I think a fair amount of those are just scratch. Not playing Danton Heinen for 12 games this year as a result of that. Not playing Trevor Zegras at his natural position. Like, how different is that expected goals
and
for
waiting a good amount of time to bring up Trevor Zegras as well.
Like, how different is that total if maybe the Ducks would have just said at the start of the year, hey, we're going to start him in the AHL. We want that to happen. We want to give him time in the AHL, but we're going to play him in his natural position as a center to let him play that in the AHL. Then they called him up at that same point in time, and we got essentially what Trevor Zegras was now, which, just as for reference, let me do this in a rate standpoint, because you just gave, what was their rate of expected goals for per 60?
This year?
This year.
2.08.
So with Trevor Zegras on the ice at the end of the season, that expected goals for per 60. Now, granted, this is through natural stat trick as compared to evolving hockey, so there are some differences. But the line of Zegras, Comtois, Terry was at 2.35 expected goals for per 60, and expected goals against of 1.45. So better offensively, better defensively than the Ducks were on the whole.
Yeah, exactly. They controlled play when they were out there. I mean, and you could see that watching them. They spent a lot more time in the offensive zone, and when they didn't get the puck, they were really good at getting it back.
Yeah.
And so, not every line is going to get it done in that style, but it was pretty obvious with them. And I think what made it even better is that you have a guy like Zegras, who's such a good setup man, who's turning out to be a good finisher too, and Comtois as well. So I think that it took them a long time to kind of come to grips with what their actual optimal lineup was. And by that time, it was just too late. And also, I know that maybe not everyone's going to agree with this, but I think that David Backes should have been an every game player this season. I mean, when he did get into the lineup, he was effective. When he played last year, he was a lot better than Derek Grant. And so this kind of, it's funny how we keep coming back to Derek Grant, but like the over-reliance on Grant, because the thing is, when you don't have top end talent, when you don't have, like a true scoring line or great possession driving lines, you can't have a line on your team that doesn't give you any value. And so when you're essentially punting on your fourth line, your margin for error just, it gets even lower for a team's margin of error that was already so low with little goaltending to support that. So having Backes out there, I think would have made it maybe not a world of a difference, but it would have helped. There's just no question about that.
And I mean, for anyone out there saying, well, you guys are harping on a fourth liner, everything like that, Grant played 14 and a half minutes a night, like in all situations. So it's not as if he was nothing.
Well, that's the thing. Like, we're talking about them as a fourth line, but in reality, the way Dallas Eakins used that
he was on the ice against Nathan McKinnon in a matchup early on in the season. Exactly. I will not forget. Like, that was just insane. And so kind of we've now touched on both the goaltending aspect of it, a lot of the usage aspects of it, which I think were a big downtrodden thing and kind of debunked, I think, the narrative a little bit of the injuries. And I think the fourth and final thing outside, or you also just touched on the kind of offensive generation issue of it. But I think the other big issue here that kind of caused our evaluation to be off is that a 56-game season is a small sample size. And so I think that you saw things like, for instance, the Ducks power play. You and I were actually discussing this a bit in depth before we went live, but the Ducks power play, for as much as it was maligned for being so poor this year, part of that was actually just pure bad luck. If you look at expected goals for on the power play, which Evolving Hockey, actually, they put out a really good article where they broke down kind of their expected goal model. They've built different models for different situations. So their power play model is different than 5-on-5 to more accurately predict how many goals should be scored from various different chances. And so, for instance, the Ducks' expected goals for per 60 on the power play is 6.57, whereas the actual goals for per 60 was 2.96. And so they were scoring about half as much as they should have. And so for anyone out there saying, well, yeah, that's because they suck. It's like, no, the 6.57 is based upon the number of chances that they are getting on the power play. So when we talked about how lethargic the power play would look at times, everything like that, that would be reflected in the expected goal for total. And so some of that may be due to the fact of Trevor Zegras, when he came up, really kind of put a spark into the power play and really added to a new element that created chances, and it hadn't necessarily resulted in goals yet. And that's even what you see if you look at Trevor Zegras' production. On the power play, I believe he had no points whatsoever on the power play. Yet, when you look at the goals, majority of his points were on the power play. So, Zegras, he had 6 points in his last 7 games, in his 7 games as a center. Those were all at 5-on-5. Eventually, the production's going to come. And so I think that that's also part of this, is that over a 56-game sample size, especially on something where the amount of time you get per game is not huge on a power play, part of it is just bad luck. And that's part of what happened here. Now, granted, I think maybe the Ducks were a little bit worse than that 6.57, but
yeah, that's what I was going to say, is even if they were generating that by volume, I still think that there was also just like a lack of talent.
But they still should have scored more than they did.
They probably should have scored more, but I don't know. I mean,
we can just end up making this special teams was an issue, because that is true also.
Well, the thing is, even if you say, looking at these numbers, that they were not as bad as the narrative would suggest, the numbers don't say they were good. Like 19th is not great.
True, fair.
You're still in the lower.
They were middle of the pack.
Well, 19th is like lower end of middle of the pack. Like you're getting into the lowest. You're getting into the third tier.
It's better than dead last in goals for per 60, though.
Better, but I feel like when you're in that territory, there is room for error up or down. And so I'm not willing to fully buy into, they're better than the narrative. Like, yeah, there probably were, but watching this team, watching every power play, they just sucked. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I guess they've just broken me after so many years
fair.
of watching them, but like, the inability to get cross-crease passing, to generate those lateral plays, to create high-danger chances from the slot. This was a big issue for this team, and I don't think it was for a complete lack of personnel. I think that they had guys that they had units that looked good, and that Dallas Eakins would just kind of abandon them when they would have one or two bad stretches, because
he would buy too much into goals 4%, like the actual goals as compared to what was happening on the ice.
Exactly. And this power play, I think, kind of followed a similar trend, which it has under Dallas Eakins, which is in the beginning of the season to middle of the season, they are trying stuff. They are trying to be a bit more creative offensively. They are trying to actually kind of carve up the penalty killers going cross ice. And then when the production isn't coming, they kind of just give up on that. And then they start going to this really caveman power play where they just fire shots from the point over and over, try to get rebounds. I mean, Dallas Eakins talked about this year, and I just don't like that mentality, because doing those things, even if you do them well, the kind of simplification, it doesn't actually bring you any closer to getting the systems you were trying to get to work to work, right?
Yeah.
You're not actually advancing the bigger plan. And so, yeah, I understand, 2 points are on the line. You want to get results, but over time, you got to find a way to instill those principles. And that's the thing with Dallas Eakins that maybe is where he falls short, is that I think he has good ideas. I think he has a good understanding of the game. We've heard him talk about like expected goals in press conferences. Like, I don't think this guy is just like clueless, but I think that he has a difficult time either imparting the principles, getting guys to buy in, or maybe he is good at getting them to buy in, but then when things aren't working, maybe there's a little too much, okay, we're just going away from this. I don't know. It could be all of these things, could be some of them, could be none of them, but I feel like there is a bit of a disconnect there with how he speaks, how he seems to understand the game, and how things actually play out on the ice. And again, like, our assessments of this roster were not like you can't do anything with this roster. Like, this is just a dead in the water roster.
And I do want to say this, kind of circling back to our preseason prediction. You and I both kind of were, we were optimistic, I think, with saying 5th. We did kind of add the caveat that 5th was assuming everything went right, or if everything went absolutely right, they could maybe finish 4th. They would be in the race for the playoff spot, but most likely than not, they would fall short. but the range of results for this franchise was huge, that they could finish anywhere from last to fourth in the division. And I think that we saw that this was on the lower end. This was when everything didn't go right. John Gibson didn't play the way he did. Dallas Eakins didn't take a step forward as a coach and didn't provide the optimal lineup, didn't play the best guys. I mean, how bad does it look in hindsight that he scratched Troy Terry for multiple games this season? And it's not as if Troy Terry's game really was that much worse than it is now.
Well, I think what looks especially bad is just that once Troy Terry started putting up points and kind of started getting the bounces, that then all of a sudden Troy Terry became this one of the team's most responsible players, according to Eakins.
I mean, shocking. You put Troy Terry with good players, good things happen. That's another thing is that the line consists. Like, he was the only line that really stayed consistent, or the only two guys that really stayed together all season were Derek Grant and Nick Delorier.
Yeah, but I just think with Terry, he was always a responsible player, and it just seems like I don't think he was actually being graded on that. I think he was being graded on his offensive production. And then once that started coming, then it's like, okay, well now he's the most responsible, one of the most responsible guys in the team. So those are all the things that went wrong. I do think that maybe we did just overrate this team a little bit, overrated the talent.
Yeah, definitely.
Because I think, again, this is something that's hard to kind of calibrate in my head, is that, we can criticize the coaching, criticize the usage, all of that. But at the end of the day, there is also the bigger question of management and this roster and the construction and how it was built. And I don't know, is it possible to hold both opinions that this roster was not well constructed and that it was not optimized? It seems like those two things do clash just a little bit.
It does. I mean, I go back always to this question that I remember Jeff Merrick would ask a bunch on Merrick versus Wyshynski way back in the day of, is it an issue of coaching or composition? And I think that this is one of those cases where it's both. Mm-hmm. And I think that if the composition was better, the team could have performed better.
Well, the margin of error would have been higher,
yes,
right? It would have been easier for them to survive some of the things that went wrong.
Yeah, and if coaching was better, then they could have finished higher also, because things would have been optimized in the better fashion. So I think that if you're trying to zero in on what's the bigger issue with this roster, because I think that's where that question kind of comes in, is it coaching or composition? What was the downfall for this roster? And I think you and I both agree that it's more so a composition issue than a coaching issue.
Well, that's the thing, because at the end of the day, even if we don't think Dallas Eakins optimized this roster, which he did not in his utilization, we have to keep in mind that Nick Delorier was brought in via trade, was extended. We have to remember that Derek Grant was brought back in free agency, signed to a three-year
deal. Yeah.
Like, the management side of this, these guys were, they were pushed on him. Like, we don't know if Derek Grant, I mean, I think Dallas Eakins really likes Derek Grant. I think he loves Nick Delorier, and I think he wanted to play them, but these are still the guys he was being given. Right. And so it shouldn't be surprising that they were mainstays in the lineup.
The only good move that Bob Murray made last offseason, and I will stand by this, is bringing in Kevin Shattenkirk.
Yeah, I mean, Kevin Shattenkirk, I think he may not have completely lived up to the billing.
He didn't live up to the billing of coming in and improving the power play.
He was still mostly fine. Yeah. I think just overall. If you look at, I think the big thing that people are going to point to, and I think it's totally fair, is the penalty taking.
Yep.
That was a huge issue, and it never really went away. I mean, looking at 2 games ago, this the second to last game of the season, still taking penalties at bad times, but overall, I think he was fine. I think he was below value a little bit, but not by a huge margin.
Yeah, he's within range of what he's getting paid.
Exactly.
And he should be able, from looking at the way he plays the game, he should be able to maintain that value for the next 2 seasons.
Yeah. So I think that we just spent 30 or so minutes talking about everything that went wrong or that, we missed on. Maybe we should take a break and then talk about positives, about what to look forward in the future.
I think, why don't we take a quick break and let's come back and let's just kind of wrap this up, and we'll get into some questions with an most valuable player for the Ducks, and then also, to continue the negative aspects, why not the least valuable player for the Ducks.
Okay.
And so
this should be easy.
With that being said, let's have a word from our sponsor. So this year, spring is going to hit a little different because we are all finally starting to get back outside and see friends again. No matter where your adventures take you, bring the comfort and style of Mack Weldon along for the ride. Trust me, your closet is going to thank you. Whether it's their hoodies, polos, tees, or active shorts, everything in the Mack Weldon collection mixes and matches seamlessly to fit in with any other trendy product you have. So, Felix, I know both you and I absolutely love the Ace sweatpants. I own, I think, about 2 of them now. You own, I don't know how many you own. Two?
Two.
They are probably my favorite sweats I've ever owned. They are probably the perfect sweat because I'm someone who likes a certain fit. I like a taper fit. I like a tight fit. I like that for how clothes fit on me, and that's how these fit. And there's something you can wear out. You can go out on a walk in it. You can kind of go out on your spring mornings that are a little bit cooler, and then eventually kind of go to shorts afterwards. And they're just amazing. I mean, what have you thought of them?
Yeah, no, they're extremely comfortable. I mean, they're probably one of the most comfortable pieces of clothing I've ever owned. Just period. They are just buttery smooth. That's the way I like to think about them. They're just buttery. Like you put them on, they just they fit perfectly. They when you put them I put them in the dryer, they don't shrink. They're just and they don't get too hot. With sweats especially. That's one of the big issues wearing sweats like in the morning, especially here in like Southern California. As you put them on in the morning because it's a little chilly. But then by noontime, you're just dying because it's too hot. And with these, look, it will get a little hotter, but that balance is way, way better. You can feel warmer in the morning and still you can wear them throughout the rest of the day and you won't even notice it.
Yeah,
They're just that comfortable.
And as the day goes on, maybe you want something more like a dry fit tee. Mack Weldon has you covered with their dry knit t-shirts for you to go work out in. I mean, you and I know both have various different Mack Weldon products for working out, whether it's their silver boxer briefs. Those I wear almost every single workout. They're fantastic and really kind of stands up to the test of time. And they have so much different technology with a wide range of customized fabrics that can keep up with you no matter what your day looks like. So whether it's just lounging like their Sunday lounge pant, which is really nice, looks nice, whether you're going on a hike and it's a little bit chilly and you need more of a sweat, there's just everything that you could ever need. Mack Weldon has you covered. And they also have their Weldon Blue, which is a totally free loyalty program. Level 1 gets you free shipping for life. And once you reach level 2 by spending $200, you get 20% off every order for the next year. And I mean, Felix, tell them about the guarantee that Mack Weldon has.
Yeah. So they want you to be comfortable. So if you don't like your first pair of underwear, you can actually keep them and they will still refund you. No questions asked. I don't know. That's a pretty big guarantee to me.
It's absolutely fantastic. So for 20% off your first order, visit mackweldon.com/CTP and enter the promo code CTP. That's mackweldon.com/CTP, promo code CTP for 20% off. Mack Weldon, reinventing men's basics. So thank you so much, Mack Weldon, for that.
Huge thank you to Mack Weldon. So
Yep.
let's finish up on some positives. I know you want to do MVP and LVP, which we will get to, but I do want to talk about that. This is something I brought up after the game on Saturday. And I do think that even though like this season definitely exposed some of the worst aspects of this franchise, the management aspect, coaching aspect, some of the utilization, like a lot of things definitely went wrong and there is no getting around that. And that's still there. That's not going away. But I also do think that a lot of good will come out of the season in the long run. I think that to me, I'll start. And this is not that long of a list, so we'll get through it in a decent amount of time. But it's the kids that really took a step forward. It's Trevor Zegras, it's Troy Terry, it's Jamie Drysdale, it's Max Comtois. I think that just those 4 names alone, nobody expected Jamie Drysdale to play this season, but because of the weird pandemic situation, he was able to play in the AHL, and then he got called up to the NHL and earned the opportunity to stay around. And yeah, even though some of the underlying numbers were not very good, I think that, like we've discussed, there's some factors there. The fact that he was playing on his off wing, the fact that he was playing with Josh Manson, who had a rough season, but still as a teenager at the NHL level, I thought he looked extremely comfortable, looked mature beyond his years. And then Trevor Zegras, look, even as a winger, even in a situation where Dallas Eakins was, using kid gloves on his minutes and jostling him around the lineup, looked great. And then once he, went down to the AHL, came back up as a center, just completely took off. And then, of course, Max Comtois filling up the net, setting career highs in goals,
Mm-hmm.
going to get a nice contract extension.
Yep.
Look, there's issues in his game, but he brings that rare quality. And then Troy Terry, who was the whipping boy of this coaching staff to start the year. I think that he showed everybody what he can do on both sides of the ice, defensively, offensively. And so I think if you put all those things together, and I'm sure there are other things, like there is still a future. There's still a bright future, I think, for this franchise.
Yep, and I think like Troy Terry, I mean, if he can finally put up some production on the power play, if that eventually comes, he can eventually be a 40 or 50 point player, which I think is what you would really want from him. I mean, he's not going to necessarily be someone that drives an offensive line, be that top producer, but if you can have a 40 to 50 point producer from him, especially his cap hit moving forward, like that's extremely, extremely valuable. And so I think you kind of hit the nail on the head with the positives for this Ducks franchise. It's that, I mean, there are obviously going to be negatives in the sense of some of the kids didn't necessarily improve and step up. But I think on the positive aspect, there were those, which granted, you and I both expected Troy Terry to be the guy that takes the biggest step. And granted, Comtois probably is the guy that you might key in on due to the production that he had. And obviously he deserves a lot of credit for that. But I think Troy Terry, with his defensive game and just kind of offensive play driving, to me, he's been the most impressive kid for this season for this Ducks franchise. We might be biased there. I might be biased there. But that's kind of
more impressive than Trevor Zegras.
I think more impressive on the whole because of just the number of games that Troy Terry played in. I think
I think that
with
Trevor Zegras, you kind of expect.
Yeah,
there's an expectation
and
there.
the 7 games, and it was also a 7-game stretch for Zegras. I think that there were issues with him on the wing, but I think a lot of that came down to the fact of how he was being handled, the position he was being put in, the fact that they had kid gloves. There were a lot of extenuating circumstances that really put him in a position to fail as compared to succeed. Yet when he came up as a center, he kind of really forced his way, and really because of being a center, was way more impactful.
And I do want to throw in, this is a bit of an aside, but I do want to throw in as well, not to the same degree as any of the guys I talked about, but I do think Isaac Lundestrom does deserve a bit of a shout out because I think that maybe he got a little overrated because of a hot stretch of scoring, but he still did show some kind of improvement. I think like when we were talking about, breaking down the pipeline, the prospect pipeline last offseason, we were talking about Lundestrom as a guy who was maybe going to max out as a fourth liner. And it feels like after this season, that ceiling has gone up a little bit.
I think
even if it's not,
I think it's a third liner now as compared to a fourth liner.
Yeah, like I think he showed a little bit more. And so it's important for this team to have guys, even if they don't become stars, it's important for these guys that they drafted that they're giving opportunities to become just serviceable NHL players at a bare minimum. And so for a good number of them to take steps forward, I think is important. It's something to be happy with. It's something to kind of, build around moving forward. There are other guys who definitely did not take steps forward that maybe have even taken steps back. But regardless, I mean, this is the positive section, and I do want to end on that note because it is important to kind of look at the whole picture. It's not all doom and gloom.
Yeah, it's definitely not. There are positives, and I think also, I mean, Danton Heinen, I think, had a solid enough season.
Yeah, I feel like we never talk about Danton Heinen.
I mean, Sonny Milano. I mean, in the small sample size, it's obviously a bummer with the concussion issues. It sounds like that he's been having, but he was a guy that looked good in the small sample size that he played in. So obviously, and like you said, Jamie Drysdale put in really bad situations, but looked okay. He had his good moments and where he looked really, really good, and he has bad moments. But that's going to happen when you're an 18 or 19-year-old playing in the NHL. One thing on Jamie Drysdale I want to ask you. He's in the NHL next year, right?
Yeah, I think that there's very little doubt about that. Yeah. I mean, I don't see what else they would do with him.
There's no way you put him back in the OHL.
Yeah, I just think he played too much at the NHL level in this year. And look, they had opportunities to send him back down, and they didn't take them. So I think that he's staying. And
one thing wrong with that. One thing I want to mention on Zegras and Drysdale, I think I saw Eric Stevens mention this. This was something I couldn't ever find an actual answer to, and Cap Friendly even didn't know when I messaged them whether the Calder Cup or Calder Trophy requirements would get prorated for the season.
Mhm.
So I think it's typically like 25 games is what someone has to play in order to be eligible for the Calder Trophy, or not eligible for next year's to basically not be considered a rookie. It is 25 games, and that's not getting prorated. So Zegras and Drysdale will be eligible for the Rookie of the Year trophy next season. So they will technically still be rookies.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like Trevor Zegras, if you're a betting man, uh, you have to keep an eye out on what those odds are going to be for the
Yeah,
Calder
because
Trophy.
Lafreniere is already has already gone through his rookie year. Stutzle is already gone. I'm
Well,
not
and
sure.
also think about who's going to be coming in next
Yeah,
year.
exactly. There's not necessarily a guy from this upcoming draft that's going to come in and blow off the doors. I mean,
And off the top of my head, there's also not like a Kaprizov who's coming over.
it's basically, I think it's going to be maybe Zegras and maybe it's going to be Zegras, Byfield, Caulfield.
Yeah, I think that would be that will be a really fun race.
Yeah,
because those are three really fun players.
I could see Caulfield being in the running for it because I mean Montreal's just a better team. He's going to be in a better situation. And he's going to put up goals.
Yeah, I mean he is playing on anyway. I don't want to talk about the Canadiens, but yeah. So yeah, I mean it's going to be fun. Like there are things to be happy with this team, and I think maybe if you're one of the fans right now who's kind of a little beat down by the season, look, we don't know. Look, I am of the belief that Dallas Eakins and Bob Murray will be back for next season. I think both will be back, and they have one more year left for each of them on their contracts. And I think after that, it's wide open. I don't know if either of them are back after that. What are your thoughts on that? Because that to me is kind of where we don't know. Because I saw someone throw out there the other day, and I kind of maybe agreed with it that Bob Murray's a bad rebuild GM, but as things get better, maybe his handling of the team improves because that's what he's better at. Well, so what are your thoughts on that?
The issue there is that, and yes, I think Bob Murray during his time when the Ducks were good got a little bit too much flack. I think
because of the lack of playoff success.
Yes, and I think that there are things you can definitely be critical of him. I think maybe pulling off a bigger deal earlier would have been better. Maybe going. Not trading Bobby Ryan for pieces and instead moving him for someone that could help the team. Different things like that you could maybe argue, but I think he did a good job of kind of improving the roster, doing things on the fringes when he already had the pieces in place. The issue is he doesn't know how to build the team when they don't have those pieces already there. And I think that doesn't necessarily change right now. And I'm not sure he knows how to really insulate those pieces to really meet that age group. And we've yet to see him make a single move to really assess or to really improve this team for the next contending window. He's more so trying to make moves in the 24 to 30 age range, which lines up with the upper end of the Terry Steele, that kind of group.
And we do have some material to judge him off of because I mean, he went out and got Volkov and Fleury this season. Those were the two big moves. And, Volkov wasn't that awesome and Fleury was fine, but we see these are not needle movers to your point.
And this is kind of where I stand on it with the rebuild and Murray, if he's which he is officially calling this a rebuild. He has mentioned rebuild. Eakins has mentioned rebuild.
Well, if he's not, Eakins is doing it for him.
Bob Murray has said this rebuild or something along those lines. And here's the issue. When you're rebuilding a team, part of it is moving out guys that you like. Like that is kind of a necessity for a rebuild is you are rebuilding the roster. You are taking out guys that you may still like that are outside of your age group and then replacing them with younger guys, with guys that will help you more in the future. You are essentially taking out from the upper age range and replacing them with the lower age range.
Yep.
And Bob Murray has yet to do that. Every guy he's moved out is never in that upper age range. He's only moving out guys that he has fallen out of favor for him. The Nick Ritchies of the world, the Andre Koshas of the world, the Brandon Montours of the world. And that's not to say those are bad trades, but the issue is that he's trading guys that he has not liked anymore. That there is a reason to trade them because he does not like them. And instead, he needs to be moving guys that he doesn't necessarily want to trade, but you need to trade them to get the team better in the future. And I think that's my concern. And maybe he does that this offseason. My concern is that every offseason it's been said, well, just wait till the offseason. Just wait till the offseason. You don't know the full puzzle. And it's like, well, at what point do we stop saying we'll wait for the offseason, because we have yet to have that? There has never been an offseason where he's done that. And so it feels like
this will be the one, Jake.
Maybe, but it feels like the boy who cried wolf at this point in time with that thought process. So kind of when looking at Murray and Aikens, I think that they both do need to go. I think that the franchise needs them to go. The franchise needs to turn over a new leaf. It needs to start over. And I want to give Dallas Aikens the benefit of the doubt. Maybe it's Bob Murray, but I mean, at the end of the day, he's been poor this season. And I think that
he's been poor 2 seasons.
Yeah. And I think that if I bring in a new GM, I want that GM to pick his coach.
Well, yeah. And one thing I do want to say on Aikens too, is that before the season started, I even said, like, I don't care really so much if they make the playoffs or not in terms of my evaluation of Dallas Aikens. I want to see changes, improvements in just how they play, the underlying metrics about how, the tactics, things like that. And we just didn't really see that this season. I mean, if anything, like I said, with the offensive chance generation, it got worse. And I think that part of that is definitely on him. So
yeah, do you think
that's why it's making me hard? It's making it hard for me to be an optimist.
Let me ask you this. Chris Kindred brought this up in the Twitch chat right now. Detroit, New Jersey, Ottawa, Los Angeles have all been trading older assets to help rebuild, and Anaheim has not been doing that, which is factual and correct. And he feels like our prospect depth is lacking because of it. Do you agree that the Anaheim Ducks prospect depth is lacking?
No, I don't think it's lacking.
I think here's my stance on this. I think they've finally added the higher end talent, but I think that every kind of piece outside of maybe Jacob Perreault doesn't really strike me as being NHL level talent in that prospect system.
Maybe Bo Gru is a guy who becomes an NHLer. Yeah. Maybe Josh Mahura eventually becomes a full-time NHLer.
But the blue line depth is really thin.
Well, I mean, I think that there are some guys.
Henry Thrune's there. Jackson Lacombe.
Yeah, and even I'm blanking on his name.
Moore.
Ian Moore, exactly. Like, I don't think I think at worst now it's more like average. Maybe it's just a little overhyped.
Fair. Yeah, that's fair.
But I think they've done a decent job of kind of restocking that pipeline.
That's fair.
And that's going to happen. That's going to happen. Like, that's going to improve again this year with this draft.
Yep, definitely. All right. Want to jump into MVP and LVP for the season? Which one do you want to do first?
Oh man. LVP is going to get me in trouble.
Let's go LVP first to be positive Sunday and end on the positive before we get into questions.
Oh, okay. Yeah, when you first said let's do LVP to start on the positive, or positive Sunday. Okay, so that we can then end on the positive. Yeah, I mean LVP to me, and again, this is probably harsh, and now maybe I'm doubling back, but just so that you can be the good guy here and I can be the bad guy. I'm doing this for you. LVP is going to be John Gibson. Wow. I just think he was really bad.
I mean, it's fair. It's fair. I think that's such a vital position.
Yeah, and at that position, being bad or being good, like you get it both ways. If you're great, you get it. You get the applause. You have your own trophy. But if you're bad, like, you kind of got to wear it. And he wasn't. Sorry, maybe that's harsh.
Yeah, fair. I mean,
you're LVP.
I let you take that, so you took the fall there. It's Derek Grant. It has to be Derek Grant. I mean, Derek Grant was god awful this year. I mean, it basically any way that you want to slice it, he was bad. The only thing that he was like good at this year was, I think, the penalty kill. I think that was it. And so outside, and sorry, let me add something. He was good at penalty kills and face-offs, which don't matter. So there you go, folks. Good at face-offs, but that
nice, very very on brand for you there.
Yeah. So I mean,
who is your MVP?
Well,
let's switch to the positive.
Real quick, I want to show real quick up on the screen now is the shooting adjusted wins above replacement from Top Down Hockey. And as you can see, when you take out shooting percentage, so kind of more so repeatable events with even strength offense, even strength defense, power play, penalty kill.
But see, I actually think that for the purposes of what we're doing now, that actually is not really that helpful or pertinent because we're judging. We're judging what has happened.
Sorry, this is a show Derek Grant, though, how poor he was.
I know, but I'm just saying, like, shooting percentage is important in this evaluation.
Fine. fine. Let me bring up the full-on war if it will load for me. Just for context, because granted, Derek Grant also still very bad in that. So
He was bad. I mean, he was bad however you slice it.
yeah, exactly. That was my point.
But and maybe I'm being too harsh on Gibson because he was probably still more valuable than he was definitely still more valuable than Derek Grant. But the problem is that at his position, his impact is huge. It's exponential.
Yeah.
Or exponentially higher. Okay, your MVP.
My MVP,
I feel
Cam
like we're gonna have
Fowler.
the same. Damn it, you stole mine. Why did I let you go first?
I don't know. You had the opportunity to go first, and you just threw it at me. Yeah, it's Cam Fowler. I mean, here's the issue with the forwards is Max Comtois was, I think, the best shooter for the Ducks. He had the best goal scorer.
Okay, but here's the thing. I do want to give him some credit for that, though.
Because that is important. I'm not discounting that. That is something that was very important. But
no. But I also think that just when we're just evaluating what has happened, yeah, shooting, like if we're just seeing who added the most value, Comtois added a ton of value. Now the issue with really honing in on the shooting percentage moving forward is that we don't know how repeatable that is.
Yeah.
But just in terms of judging the past, I think it's fair to give Comtois the proper credit for that.
Yeah, no, he should get the proper credit, but I think you also need to value play driving and pushing.
Yes, and Fowler was a beast in all that.
And whereas Comtois, on the other hand, left you lacking a little bit with what he did outside of that. I mean, he was a little bit of, like you said this, I think before the show, a little bit negative empty calorie scoring in a way.
Well, that's the thing is he scored a ton and didn't, the actual offense he brought wasn't quite on that same level. Now, I got to say, though, it is weird because when you look at like top-down hockey, their model for, wins above replacement, he actually looks a lot better in terms of play driving just offensively than he does like with evolving hockey.
Yep.
So that does give me a little confidence, and it gives me the confidence to say that since you already picked Cam Fowler, I'll go Max Comtois.
I didn't even get to really. I was just talking about why I didn't pick Comtois real quick.
Sorry, I'm just snatching the spotlight from you.
You are, but on Cam Fowler had an absolutely fantastic season. He elevated any single defenseman that played with him. He single-handedly essentially got the Ducks picks. I mean, he got the Ducks a 4th-round pick for Erik Goodbranson. He essentially got the Ducks Hayden Fleury because he elevated Yanni Hakanpää enough and elevated his trade value where Carolina went out and got him. And so basically anyone that he's played with over the last...
I mean, he almost resuscitated Jacob Larson's career at the very end there.
Exactly. I mean, Michael Del Zotto, Erik Goodbranson looked like an NHL caliber defenseman.
Yeah.
For the Ducks.
He was great this season and quietly great. Like maybe the point production, it didn't blow anybody away, but I thought that he was very solid in all aspects of the game, offensively, defensively, transition. He was good. And I mean, even looking at like wins above replacement, he was still positive value, even like looking at the power play. So I'm happy for him because, he has been around for a long time and, has been critiqued by the likes of people like me. And I'm sure he doesn't read that into that at all, but it's just nice to see him have a good season.
And I think it's nice to see him because he's also getting paid a decent amount. And the fact that
for the Ducks moving forward, it's important.
Yeah, and you can see now up on the screen is his RAPM chart from Evolving Hockey, and you can see just how good he was for this Ducks team this year. I mean, in terms of looking at shot against, the only thing he was below average on was expected goals against, but he still limited shot quantity. He was generating shot quality, shot quantity for, and goals were going in. The only other thing was just he was generating chances for the Ducks on the power play at least, and it just wasn't going in the back of the net. And so, I mean, he was very, very good for the Ducks. And I mean, I think he was undoubtedly the Ducks MVP this year.
Yeah, I'll go Max Comtois, even though I 100% agree with Fowler as a pick, but Max Comtois was, I mean, is it fair to say he was their best forward just in terms of like if you are factoring in production?
If you're factoring in production, yes, because it's undeniable. You can't ignore the fact that he led the Ducks in points, and that's something that is definitely important.
Yeah,
but
even when you look at his play driving, like even if you look at, for example, Evolving Hockey's RAPM charts, which like the kind of isolated impact on the overall flow of the game, he actually, I mean, his numbers were not that good for quite a bit of time there, and maybe it's playing on a line with Trevor Zegras and Troy Terry, but those numbers took an uptick. And even there, he is looking a lot better. And even more importantly, he's still a negative defensively, but with his even strength offense, improving, that is less of a concern
Yeah,
because he can somewhat make up for it.
I will say I think Rickard Rakell also had a solid season. I think he's up there. I think the three forwards that played a lot of the season that I would put in that mix would be, and this is also in some ways, I guess, not purely looking at production. I guess let me go four forwards here. I'm expanding it. Comtois, Rakell, Terry, Getzlaf.
Yeah, but I am just going to give Comtois the
Because he
nod
scored.
there. Yeah, and also like I mean, at the end of the day, and this is the issue with like the smaller sample, but still
Well,
the way the dust settled on his numbers, he looked good in terms of driving play at 5-on-5 offensively.
let me ask you this much right here, because this is something I'm kind of looking at right now, and I'm almost asking myself this question. And I think that this is the best thing for like a podcast, is just throwing out ideas.
Well, Comtois is the kind of player that does.
Well, this isn't even about Comtois. This is now about Rickard Rakell. Rakell's only finished 5 points back of Max Comtois, and did that with very poor shooting percentage.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think if you want to talk about that in terms of just the perception of Rakell, I think a lot of people are probably going to be out on Rakell after this season, but I think he was fine. I mean, there were definitely areas of his game that took a little bit of a step back, and then of course the finishing was just not there at all, but for the most part, who he was this season is who he's kind of been the last couple of years. I mean, a guy who is going to bring you offense, is not going to be great defensively, but the thing is, in the past few years, Rakell has had the production to kind of make you forget about some of the weaknesses away from the puck. But this season, without that, I mean, everything was kind of laid bare, but he was still, I think he was still fine.
He led the team in shots on goal by a significant margin. 144 shots on goal to Comtois' 94. Like, that is a big margin between first and second.
I think outside of Comtois improving, like his defensive game and things like that, I do think for him to become a guy who we can feel confident about sustaining his production, he is going to have to increase that shot volume.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't hurt that a lot of his chances seem to be, crashing the net. Yeah, the slot area, but it's still like something that you'd like to see. But with Rakell, look, I don't think he had a bad season at all in terms of just how he was playing. But I can't give him the MVP because ultimately he didn't contribute as much as Max Comtois did.
I mean, this is just kind of where I was going with this, is that it's not as if it was night and day, though, in the production. It was 5 points difference. I think that's something that's interesting to me, is that the perception of Rakell, and especially looking at these numbers, is he really didn't produce from a shooting aspect, yet he still put up a lot of points. Like, he still was, I mean, granted, 28.
A lot.
Yeah.
Careful with the a lot.
Relatively for the Ducks. If he would have shot the amount that or had the impact from a shooting perspective that Comtois did, he would have probably been in the 40 or 50 point range.
Yeah, I think that just what people, I mean, the thing with Comtois versus Rakell is that Comtois almost had double the amount of goals.
Yep.
And so that'll kind of shift the perception there. But I think Comtois was impactful. And I think if you try to compare the impacts, if you try to compare the RAPM charts, like Comtois was close in that regard to Rakell. So, and like, it's funny because the way that their profiles look here at the end of the season, they look like similar players actually. And it's funny that they don't really play the same at all, but their statistical profiles look similar. And like Comtois' production this year is very similar to Rakell in his last contract year. So I don't know. It's just interesting. It's just there's so much to unpack with this team, and we'll probably do more like a kind of player by player evaluation at some point in the offseason. But
By the way,
so I'm going Comtois. You went Fowler,
and Ryan Getzlaf deserves some love. He wasn't the MVP, but he deserves some love.
Well, again, I mean, this is going to become a theme on this show until next season. But I think Ryan Getzlaf got way too much flack this year. I understand he wasn't the player that that his contract that you would hope that he would be, but he's 36, right? He's just not going to be that guy. That's just how these things work. His impact on the game was fine. He was playing these he was getting some horrendous like deployment. At the end of the season, playing on the wing, he was fed a steady diet of Max Jones all season, who, is a fine kind of, checking winger, but
Max Jones is basically replacement level. I think that's where you and I have settled in on him.
Exactly, but Getzlaf was fine this year, and he was good defensively. He still drove offense. He was still a positive impact in that regard. Just again, for a lot of these veteran Ducks, just did not get the production. Now, I will say that there is a bit of a demerit for Getzlaf and for a lot of the Ducks team, especially the forwards, and Kevin Shattenkirk, is the power play, because
Yeah,
his impact on the
that's
power
fair.
play, he was not a positive impact
I
on
mean,
the power
let
play.
me ask.
And you would hope that would be where he would thrive, but I do think that that's where coaching does come in.
I was gonna say, let me throw it out there. How much of that, if every single person across the board was like that, how much do we put on the players and how much do we put on the coaches then?
Well, that's the thing, and that's why when I hear, oh well, the Ducks power play, the chance generation was still like kind of middle of the pack. It's like that's why I have a hard time putting much stock into that, or viewing that as a positive, because I really do think that there was just more value kind of left on the table, like with a guy like Ryan Getzlaf. It just feels like you should be able to find a way to build a decent power play with a Ryan Getzlaf type, with an elite playmaker. And instead, I mean, they just kind of wasted him. And
Yep.
it's funny because Eric Stevens wrote that article about, wasting John Gibson, and comparing him to Mike Trout with the Angels. And I think that the Ducks have done a lot of that with Ryan Getzlaf in the last few years,
Yep.
because he's still been good. And, a lot of people don't want to hear that, but that is the truth.
Yep, exactly. So let's get into some questions. So we got some from Twitter, so I want to hit these real quick, and then Twitch, we're coming to you. So hold on to your questions. We'll get to them all after that, after these. But Alex McKay said, curious question for the pod. If the NHL players participate in the upcoming Winter Olympics, February 2022, which Ducks would get a legitimate call from their national teams, if any?
I think John Gibson is safely. I think he might be the only lock out of anyone.
I think it's him, Hellebuyck, and probably Spencer Knight would be my three for the U.S., I would bet.
Yeah, but I think Gibson is solidly in there.
Yeah,
I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they actually look at the numbers he's put up, but it seems like the Olympics are kind of reputation based.
Yeah.
And so I think he's in there, especially with Team USA calling the shots. I don't know if Cam Fowler gets on that team just because there's so many good, U.S. born defensemen, but he should be considered at bare minimum.
Yep.
I feel like Shattenkirk is probably a little bit too much on the outside looking in.
Yeah, I
at
agree.
this point. And then for Sweden, I mean, I think Rickard Rakell is in there.
Yep.
Solidly. You and I disagree on Hampus Lindholm. I think it's a tougher road for him because Sweden has a lot of defensemen.
Well, keep in mind that this is just about making the team.
Yeah, but he has he will probably be on their team though, even if he's not necessarily in the lineup every single game.
Yep.
He'll likely be on their team. Here's a guy. I mean, do you think? Okay, this is probably going to sound ludicrous. Maybe just drinking the Kool-Aid too much. But do you think that with another good stretch of play and production, that Troy Terry could be a fringe kind of depth guy for Team USA?
I don't think so, because have you looked? No, I don't think so, because Team USA is pretty stacked.
They are stacked. I mean, Trevor Zegras is another name that I would be curious about.
I think Trevor Zegras has more of a chance to make Team USA because of the World Junior reputation.
Well, Troy Terry's World Junior reputation.
Yeah, Trevor Zegras set an American record.
Yeah, I know.
A little bit of a different caliber there.
Yes, I agree.
And so the fact that they may view Trevor Zegras as being one of the future pieces, so they may want to bring him on to essentially just have the experience, maybe not play, but be the 14th forward or whatever it is, and be there with the team. Sometimes national teams want to do that. So yeah. I could see that potentially happening with Trevor Zegras, especially because I could see him getting invited to the summer camp, and I could see if he has a hot start to the year and puts up a bunch of points, is in the race for Rookie of the Year come the time they announce. Because what is it? They announce the roster typically. I think it's at the Winter Classic. So if him or Terry have a hot start to the year, I wouldn't rule it out.
Yeah,
the ability for that to happen, but I think it's more likely for Trevor Zegras to make the team than Troy Terry.
Yeah, I'm gonna go out on a limb though, and no Duck I think is gonna be on Team Canada.
Yeah,
or have a chance for Team Canada.
Yeah,
I mean, all due respect to the season Colintois has had, but it's Canada.
Yeah. So I think that
is Volkov a outside looking in for Russia? I would imagine.
I would imagine
because I feel like those
is Silverberg on the outside looking in
for Sweden.
Yeah.
That is a good question. I mean, let's see. I would imagine so. I mean, the thing with Sweden is that we think a lot about their D-men, but they have a lot of options up front as well.
But I feel like they may value kind of Silverberg's defensive game.
Well, here are the guys that they have to put in at right wing. You have Elias Lindholm, William Nylander, Victor Arvidsson.
Well, Elias
And
Lindholm has been playing center this year.
yeah, but so with all the centers that they have, these guys are going to be shifted to the wing.
True.
And so I don't know. And also like Silverberg just,
I could see Silverberg making over like Niels Hoglander, who is the fourth guy you were going to say.
I mean, can you?
Yeah, I could.
Okay. The
Older
goggles there.
Older veteran player. I could see Sweden wanting a more defensively responsible player.
The dumb thing about that is that in a short tournament, that's actually not the kind of guy you want.
Oh, agreed.
Role.
I'm just
you want a
saying
guy
that,
who can catch fire.
Yeah, I could see them doing it. So
Truth.
Yeah.
But outside of that though, like I don't, there's no fins. So
Yep. All right. So let's get to this question from Joe, fellow Spurs fan, had two questions saying, can you two be bold and rank your top 10 draft prospects, or at least tier them based on what you've seen via video and statistical models? Doesn't matter if your knowledge of them isn't as extensive as you desire. It's still interesting and valid. So
wow,
you and I,
thank you.
Yes,
I would actually disagree, but
yeah. So I think the way to do this, because you and I both, I think, are in the same state where we've started our draft research, have a good handle on everyone, but need to do a bit of a deeper dive into watching film on each one, which you and I think are going to do a little bit more of in the next little bit.
Well, now there's time.
Yes. So I think the way to do this is kind of throwing guys into tiers. And so
sure. You can do that if you'd like.
And that's how I'm going to do this right now. So
go for it.
My top tier of this draft personally is it's a top 4. It's Owen Power, Matt Beniers, William Eklund, and Brant Clark. And I think that those 4 are the clear top 4 players in this draft. And the reason why I kind of say those 4 players is those guys have the track record, have the reputation. They've been scouted by a bunch of different people. They've kind of settled into those positions. I have my issues with guys with Owen Power slightly, with him being the consensus number 1.
I wouldn't have Power in that tier.
The reason I have him in that tier is I think that you have to recognize what he has. I think that I have him on him fourth in that tier.
I recognize it, but I don't like. Okay. The thing is, to me, I just don't value that kind of player with like that high of a pick when you do have at least some kind of ceiling type plays.
So available. I think he's top tier, but I think if I were drafting, I would take any of the other 3. I would take Beniers, Eklund, and Clark all over Owen.
Yeah, Power. I mean. Yeah, that's the thing. Like, I definitely value, like, so to me, my top tier would be, and I might even order them. I think I might have Clark at the top of this tier, which might be too bold, but Clark with Beniers and Eklund is kind of that top grouping for me. Just because with Clark and Eklund, you do have guys who can kind of change the outlook for you offensively. And Clark does it from the back end. Eklund does.
Do we underrate Matt Beniers' offensive game?
No, I don't think we underrate it. I think we properly rate it. Like, he is a very good offensive player, play driving, but just doesn't necessarily have that kind of spark, that kind of dynamic offensive toolkit.
So let me just mention this. I was looking up some numbers last night because I was just curious. Matt Beniers in the last, I think it's like 10 or 20 years in the NCAA hockey, has the second best point per game pace from a draft eligible player. The only player that's higher is Jack Eichel, who was like 1.7. Whereas Matt Beniers was at 1.0.
If you told me Matt Beniers is your first overall pick, I would probably have very little pushback on that, if any.
And that is where, I'll just number mine, I would probably go Beniers, then Eklund, then Clark.
Yeah, I just really like Clark. I also really like Eklund. I also really like Beniers. Yep. It's kind of like a matter of taste. If you maybe were to put me in a position where I had to make the decision, I think I would probably land Beniers, just because he does seem like, of these 3 guys, he has the most probably polished overall game, and he does have that offensive ability as well. But with Clark, there just seems, and with Eklund, same thing, there just seems to be so much potential there, so much offensive potential. And that's what you want to shoot for when you're picking that high.
Yeah.
And so me maybe being higher on the other guys has less to do with what Beniers can't do, and just what I think those other guys can potentially do.
That's fair. So I think Power is part of this group. I think you and I disagree there, but I think that he is at the bottom of this group, but he is in this. I think he's in the same tier.
Yeah, I mean, if you said that to me, like in the way you're saying it, like maybe I'll agree. But I just, again, like if I'm picking with one of these top three picks, I would just have a hard time picking Owen Power. I
Yep.
really would.
And then, so let's get into the next tier. Who do you have in your next tier? I'm going to make you go first this time.
Yeah, I mean, this is a really hard one because like we've been talking about, like this is where the preparation would be, a longer prep would be useful. I mean, one guy that I think seems to be kind of talked about a lot and a guy that, you know, I think some people there's a bit of a range of opinions is Simon Edvinsson, because with Simon Edvinsson, he is again in this group of D men that people have kind of built their perception of the draft class around as this there's a bunch of D men. And I think that for him, he's not a guy that I would have that far up there. I know that Bob McKenzie like had him as high as like tied for second, but I just want to put his name as someone that I don't hold
I would have him
quite as
two
highly.
two tiers down from the top tier. So let's the second tier for me is probably going to be Dylan Gunther, Kent Johnson, Fabian Lissel, and Luke Hughes.
Yeah, no, see, I would not have Luke
You
Hughes
would
in
not.
there.
I have Luke Hughes there. You don't. I
Well,
know
so
that.
one guy that a lot of people are lower on, and there's definitely understandable reasons, but I really like Cole Sillinger's
Yeah,
game, and I do think that that shot, that offensive ability, I know that his playmaking kind of went missing this year, but he is a guy who I would have in that second tier, and he's definitely more of a I would say shot in the dark, but he does have that offensive ability that gets me excited. But yeah, I would agree with Dylan Gunther in there for
should
sure.
two things. Should we have Jesper Wallstat in this tier?
I mean, I think if you're just being an objective kind of an analyst, you have to get him in here soon, because you're running out of time. I just would not draft a goalie that high. That's
Yeah.
the issue for me.
So I think that maybe that second tier. So if we're gonna kind of come together for our consensus, I think kind of in the way I put it, let's just agree that top tier includes power, but it's the very low end of it. The second tier is Gunther, Wallstedt, Sillinger, Johnson, Lissel, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think Lascelles has really come up at the U18s, and I
Mm-hmm.
know that like we're probably reading into that too much, but we're working off of limited
Yeah,
information
and the
here.
one thing I want to mention on Dylan Gunther, because he's all over the place on draft boards. Some places have him, I think, fourth or third. I think that was I think Bob McKenzie's had him that high. My concern with Dylan Gunther is sample size. And granted, that same thing can be said for a lot of guys in this draft class, but he is a guy, if you go back and look at draft boards prior to the WHL season starting, he's maybe middle of the first round type of guy. And then he puts up 2 points per game in the WHL, which, if you go back the last 20 years, is the best point per game pace out of any forward in the WHL over that time span. But it was only over 12 games.
Yeah, I mean
So,
that's just not enough.
yeah, and so that's my concern, is putting too much faith in a 12-game sample size. Where granted, he produced insanely well, but I'm just very hesitant to have this guy jump from being essentially a mid first round pick to being a top 5 pick. And so I
Have
have
you
him.
you haven't named Kent Johnson yet, have you?
I have him in. Yes, I did, in this tier.
Okay. Okay, that's what I figured.
This
Okay.
second tier, and then for me, the third tier is going to be the one with Simone Edvinsson. So that would be kind of rounding out the top 10, I believe.
Uh-huh. Okay. And you haven't put in Mason McTavish, just
I
for
have
the
not.
record.
I don't know.
Okay.
I honestly don't know enough about Mason McTavish.
Yeah, I mean, he's looked really good at the U18s, and I mean, he does seem to have that kind of like two-way ability. He's also a good finisher and type, but yeah, that I think that it's a sensible kind of list that we've cobbled together here.
Yeah,
Again, I'm excited to dig into this class more.
and
The one name that there's a lot of like disparity with, it seems, just in terms of like for example, how like at the hockey prospecting model will rank him and how like scouts rating him is Sasha Postyav, because it seems like he's getting a little more buzz now.
well,
He
because he had a
has that
good
offense
U18.
ability. Yeah, exactly. And so I'll just be curious kind of where he ends up.
By the way, so Bob McKenzie's draft had Gunther at number 2. So I'm looking at elite prospects. So yeah, so that's kind of the type of small sample size theater that I'm terrified of with Gunther, is that moving a guy up from like middle of the first round to second because of
Yeah.
12 games.
Yeah, no, you don't want to do that. But that being said, the WHL is a tough league.
It is.
Like the equivalency there is it's significant, and so
And he's very highly rated. I think he's the highest rated by Byron Bader's model. And so it's not a situation where the stats don't
Yeah.
back him up. It's just more so my own personal
Yeah. So I,
view
I,
of him.
I think what's exciting about this draft class is that even though there is I mean, to me, and I think to a lot of people, it's clear, like there isn't like a true top guy. There's definitely no, um, generational talent in here, but there is this kind of collection of talent. There are a lot
They're
of
good
guys
players.
there's a lot of good players who I think, you can be drafting even outside the top 5, even outside the top 10, and you could get a quality player who will help your team. And I think it's going to be fun over the next month or two here to just kind of sift through this list, sift through the names, and kind of come up with our own board.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And so, I think that
And if you're the Ducks, that should excite you,
yeah.
because the Ducks, who are notorious for falling back in the
Well,
lottery, they could still get a good player.
and here's the thing, as a Ducks fan, and this is kind of what I've tried to say a bunch this season, but finishing second is perfect, honestly, because
Second to last.
second best odds. Because as for the Ducks now, I mean, I think the best percentage chance. So let me bring it up real quick. But Tankathon has the percentage odds of essentially what position you can end up in. So the Ducks have a 13.5% chance of first overall, 13% chance of second overall, 29% chance of third, and 44.5% chance of finishing fourth. And so that's due to the fact that there's 2 lotteries. So it's more likely, or most likely, that essentially a team from below the Ducks would win both lotteries. And so the thing is, for the Ducks, that's good, is that you're going to have a pick of one first, second, third, or fourth. And as we talked about, that top 4, that is kind of that tier. And honestly, most likely, the guy that you and I have at the very bottom of that tier is going to go first overall. And so if Owen Power goes first overall, if you're sitting second, third, or fourth, you're going to get one of Eklund, Beniers, or Clark. So
assuming that those are the 3 that.
Yeah. I mean, who knows? This thing could go all over the place. But if we're trying to do a comparison of this draft to last, I would say that the top end of this draft, that top tier, kind of is in line with essentially like the Raymond, Holtz, Drysdale, that type of tier of player.
Yeah, maybe a shade below, but I mean, not far off.
If you look at Eklund's production in the SHL this year, it's better than where Raymond was at last year.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's in that same thing as the second tier of the last draft.
Yeah.
So that's kind of that. So let's get into one more question from Twitter, and then we will get into Twitch. So Twitch, we are coming to you shortly. This comes from William Lewis. Said, question for the pod. This draft class isn't getting a huge amount of hype. Should Bob Murray be targeting 2022 first round picks rather than 21? Whoops. This was an old question. Whoops. My bad there. That's actually not one that I should be looking at. My bad. This is the one I meant. Sorry, this comes from Ethan McGarvey. Said, I want to pose this question. Are the Ducks saving the old school eggplant and jade jerseys from when the team is actually competitive again?
Sorry, what was the question?
Do you think the Ducks are saving the eggplant and jade jerseys for when the Ducks are actually competitive again?
Nah, I don't think there's any plan there.
Yep, I agree completely. So, for those of you watching this on YouTube, yes, we're on YouTube. Find us at youtube.com/crashthepond, or on your favorite podcast services. We do a live stream of the show each and every time at twitch.tv/crashthepond, where you can tune in live, interact with us in the chat, and support the show. If you have Amazon Prime, you have one free Twitch Prime sub each and every month. You do have to hit that subscribe button after 30 days, and it does help out more than you can imagine. You can do it just like Ginger Wolf did, who resubbed for 13 months. You get special emotes in the chat, special badges next to your name, and it does help support this show a lot. So, DB Lowry has this question, says, what resources would you recommend to start learning about advanced/fancy stats? I want to try and move beyond the eye test, but all the charts and numbers are pretty intimidating.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I know that he would be saying this who is here, but I think CJ has done a couple of articles like advanced stats primers. So I want to give him the plug there. And I think it's over at Anaheim Calling if you search it. But if you just go even to like evolving/hockey.com's website,
go to their glossary is really good.
If you just, because that's what I've done over time, is if you just go to the glossary, and you can, and like the first the first step is just general terms, just kind of getting everything in order. And then you can read about how they, create their models, how the tables work. I think just familiarizing yourself with the language and how the charts are achieved, I think that all of that is helpful. But there's a ton of resources out there, and honestly, like, we can probably even shoot you like links to articles and different things like
Yeah,
that.
and there's a really good one. I think it was by Charlie O'Connor at the Athletic, way back in the early days of the Athletic. That is almost like a advanced analytics or advanced stats 101. That is probably the one that I always go to if people ask me for an article, because I think it does a really good job of summarizing everything. And honestly, as we start getting into the off season again, we could honestly just do an episode. We've done it once in the past where we kind of dove into all the numbers, tried to do our best to explain it. Because I think there is something to reading and there's something to actually hearing it with someone who can explain it well. And so I think we can probably do that over summer at some point if you would want that. So let us know if that's something you have appetite for. As we hit the summer, it becomes a little bit more like we're searching for topics. So if that's something you want to hear, we can definitely do that. By the way, I forgot to ask this question. This came from Joe on Twitter. Top 3 favorite sitcoms.
Well, so I feel like I haven't seen enough shows to really weigh in on this.
Damn.
Oh, hold on. So sitcom, I just Googled sitcoms. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, what are we defining as a sitcom? This is how clueless
Let's
I
just
am.
go with a network television show.
Oh, I don't know. Okay. Well, I see Arrested Development is on the list of sitcoms when I just type it into Google. Does that count?
Sure.
I mean, love that show. So
Okay.
there you go.
So I'm going to do How I Met Your Mother, the last season, taking that out. One of my favorite shows, Scrubs, and I'm going to go with 30 Rock.
Okay.
So there you go, folks.
Yeah, I have no opinion on that.
Yeah.
Whatsoever.
There was, sorry, I'm trying to scroll up because there were some questions earlier that I did want to get to. One was from the Hardcore Luchador. Asked us, Gibson carried the team for the first month of the season, saw how it was going, and simply gave up and phoned it in. Do you guys agree with this take?
See, that narrative could be true, but we just have no way of knowing that. Like, I think that's the problem with a lot of the narrative around Gibson is there's a lot of, he's not motivated, the team is bad, and it's like, I don't necessarily, we have no way of knowing that. Like, it's just unknowable. And so again, could be true, but it's not really provable. So I have to kind of stick with just judging the performance, and like, maybe there is a touch of that, but even if he was unmotivated, I still don't think that should make John Gibson all of a sudden this like awful goaltender. And so that can't just be it. Right. Even if it were true.
Yeah. By the way, real quick, sorry, I'm scrolling through the chat right now.
Seinfeld is great.
Corey Proman had Gunther #1 overall.
Next question.
I was teeing you up for something, seeing if you would take the bait.
Next question.
Ginger Wolf says, what team will you guys cover when this is who is protected? Delorier, Grant, Steele, Rowney, Larson, Manson, Lindholm, Shattenkirk. No way it's happening. So sticking with the Ducks. Who would you sign, or would you sign Tom Wilson in Anaheim?
I mean, I'm not a huge fan of the antics. I'm not gonna lie, not a huge fan of it.
Agreed.
But he is a good player. It's tough to say. I don't want to get involved in this debate, and I also just honestly don't have a huge opinion on it. But I would probably err towards no.
Yeah, fair enough. Lewis X2.
You dodged it, by the way.
I'm very good at dodging questions I don't want to answer.
Well, I know your answer is no.
Yeah,
so
my answer is no.
I'll out you there.
Lewis X209 says, favorite barbecue side dish?
You talking like legit like barbecue?
Like if you're going to get barbecue, what's your favorite?
Like the cuisine, not like at a barbecue?
Yeah.
Well, okay, I've been to Nashville, and there's just nothing wrong with mac and cheese. There's just nothing wrong with it. It's elite.
Damn it!
It's elite.
Why did you have to take mine?
I mean, this is the catch-22 of you trying to put me on the spot.
Mac and cheese is the correct answer, but
sometimes I'll steal your answer.
The other correct answer would be cornbread.
Cornbread is not good. Sorry.
What?
It's just whatever. It gets so much hype for nothing. It's just bread. It's just bread. It's fine. Oh. Did I just gain a new wave of enemies?
Felix, you just find ways with like random food things that should not be controversial to make a very controversial take, like pie. Another one.
No,
Cinnamon toast.
I didn't say I don't like pie. I just said I don't like fruit pie, like apple, those kind of things.
So basically, most pies.
Okay, the thing with cornbread, okay, it's not actually bad. It just does nothing for me. It does absolutely nothing for me.
Honey Badger says fresh cornbread bread with honey and butter is so good. He's right. The chat's after you now.
That's fine.
M
That's
Young
fine.
said, "I know this is way in advance and don't know what your knowledge on this is, but what's your ranking? What's your ranking for these next three generational talent? Wright, Bedard, and Michkov."
I love that this is the theme now. Just here's a question that you might not be prepared for, but answer it anyway. Okay, well, I'm just gonna go off of like viral clips that I've seen of
Supposedly
all these
Bedard
guys.
is going to be the best.
Yeah,
Shane Wright, everyone's saying is basically not going to be like McDavid level good, but definitely very, very good.
yeah, I'm going Bedard.
Yeah.
Maybe Michkov just to support the Russian, but I'll go Bedard.
Yeah. Chris Kindred asks, how much of the scratching of Terry, Henrique, and Heinen was a Bob Murray move more than Aikens? These players were all on the trade block at points during the season, and do you believe Murray is meddling in lineup decisions?
I mean, it's just again, it's one of these things. It's impossible.
I'm just throwing
it's
you questions and seeing if you'll answer.
I'm getting mad because of like I can't really answer these. I mean, I do think that even if it's not a direct Murray is telling Aikens to do this, like by virtue of signing guys to contracts, there is a message there. And so, yeah, I think that happens in every team. GMs do have voices in that to some degree. But I'm not giving Aikens that out fully because we don't know.
Yeah. And Just a Rush guy asks, question, if Aikens does get the axe, who do you slot in?
John Tortorella.
Oh God, no.
Available. No, I'm kidding. Totally kidding.
No,
I hope nobody takes
actually,
that seriously. Please do not take that seriously.
If Dallas Aikens is fired and Bob Murray is still the GM, I could see it.
It could be Torts. They need a tough love guy in there. Well, okay. The thing with Tortorella is that I just don't really enjoy his brand. His kind of like, the public just
torching of players.
Just, yeah, like the way that he handles players, the way that he goes about it publicly. Like, I don't really enjoy that. I'm not going to lie to you. But there is something to be said that he does seem to make teams better, at least in the short term. Like he does increase their floor, it seems. And so I will give him that credit. And I think he's a better coach at the NHL level than Aikens. But I can't really stand the way he tends to go about things. So
do you think that Rick Tocchet should be in the running because they just agreed to part ways?
I just don't understand. What is the Tocchet hype built on?
Like
what has he actually done?
I don't agree with it. I'm just purely looking.
You're just trying to get a rise out of me.
100%. 100%.
No, I'm out on the Tocchet thing too. I mean, that was part of the reason why I've always been kind of down on the Coyotes is because that was part of the hype train, and there's just nothing there to really support it.
Yeah. And I mean the coaches that they should be looking at are Boudreau and Gallant.
Yeah, but they're not gonna. First off, they're not gonna bring back Boudreau for a second time around.
If Bob Murray's there, no.
And thirdly, I'm not confident that they'll like be willing to pay that kind of coach salary because those guys are some of the higher earning coaches, and like in the $3 million range probably.
Depends on kind of what they're looking for and what's out on the market right now. There's not exactly a whole bunch of vacancies right now.
There's going to be a lot more vacancies, I think, this summer. Well, I mean, we just had 2 pop up. I think, like, no one knows what's going to happen with the Canadiens coaching job.
But here's the thing. Are those 2 teams that are willing to pay?
Are you talking about Arizona and Columbus?
Exactly.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, probably not.
Look at what we know about the Coyotes franchise.
Well, the thing is with the Coyotes, I don't think Gallant and Boudreau would go to those teams because they don't seem to be gearing up to be winners.
Mm-hmm.
But the Blue Jackets do have kind of an interesting roster. I mean, there's pieces there at least, and so maybe that draws some interest. I don't know. I mean, we'll see. But are we? What is even the question anymore? I feel like we're just completely at sea here.
Basically, who would get if Aikens gets axed? Who's the guy that comes in?
Who's the guy that comes in? Well, to be honest with you, I haven't made my list of like who would be next after Aikens, and I probably should have a list. I should have a couple names ready for you, but I don't. I'm sorry.
Well,
Now you're just Googling NHL coach names
I
just to
mean,
make me look bad.
there's no way
Well,
that there's no
late.
way that Kevin Dineen would be the guy either.
No.
If they fire Aikens, they're not going to go back to the well of
Well,
bringing up their AHL guy.
Lane Lambert is a guy whose name has been brought up a lot, and his name is being brought up again. And I think maybe this time around, I know that the Ducks were looking at him last time. Maybe this time you actually pull the trigger.
I mean,
because he does at least bring you some defensive acumen.
Yeah. So there's him. There's also, I mean, who knows what's going to happen with Travis Green?
Yeah, that's a good point.
I don't know.
And you know that him and the Ducks did talk.
And I don't know if I would necessarily want Travis Green. I think that his numbers in Vancouver were not actually that great.
Well, the roster is also
true. So let's see. DB Lowry asks, coolest goalie setup this year
among the Ducks.
Yeah. Let's just go among the Ducks and in the league.
Okay. Among the Ducks, I think it's got to be John Gibson with the reverse retros.
Yes.
Just purely on the mask. Like the mask alone wins it. I think Stolar's had a good look too. And then the best look in the NHL is easily Carey Price with the bringing back the Patrick Waugh mask and like the same layout of pads and everything.
I just
and
set you up. I teed you up. The
tan palm. You did, and I don't think you actually saw it coming.
No, I did not.
You're mad at yourself.
I am.
You don't have a response, which is classic.
I don't because it's
dodging.
Yeah, exactly. Louis calling you a homer, by the way. AMC NLB asks, who do you have for the Ducks GM if they fire Bob Murray?
Ooh, that is a tough one because again, like with the pool of GMs are not quite like coaches where there's a lot of there's a ton of retreads. And so I don't necessarily know, again, to be honest with you, what direction they would go in.
Eric Tulsky or Mike Gillis?
Well, yeah, those are names that we tend to bring up every time, but I don't know.
Yeah, who knows?
Yeah, I don't know what their status is. But Mike Gillis, 100%, if he's available, if he's willing, if the Ducks are willing to pay, that is a guy who would be very interesting.
The Samuelis have hired one general manager.
Yeah. And they didn't even really hire him. They kind of just promoted him.
No. They hired Brian Burke.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah, because they just promoted Bob Murray once Brian Burke left. It's not as if they went out and hired. So, yeah.
John Chayka. No.
Well, he can't even. He's like suspended for multiple years. He can't come back to the NHL for a couple years. So let's hit two more questions. Chris Kindred asked us, are you supporting the tank in 2022 for Shane Wright?
Yeah.
I think overall, yes. I don't know. I think that this Ducks team, I'm going to talk myself into just like I did this season.
You are. I think we've done it the last 2 years.
We have, but maybe at some point it will. I don't think this Ducks team's going to be as bad next year, though. I really don't.
Okay, here's my issue with that statement, is that this roster has a good chance of being almost the same.
Here's the thing. If the proper moves are made, this team...
They won't be.
Yeah,
just
fair.
Assume they won't be.
Fair.
Well, also, what is the move? Look at their cap sheet. Look, they're gonna have almost the same roster.
Well, because Comtois is gonna get paid.
And the thing is, if they trade Raquel and Manson, that's not gonna make next year's roster better.
True.
In
Manson might.
True. But in theory, you're doing that for futures if you're doing it.
True.
Although we don't know what Bob Murray will do.
Yeah.
Likely he will not do that.
So let's end with this one. Just a Rush guy. Do you expose Josh Manson to expansion?
Yeah.
You 100%. And I would. Here's the 100%. Thing.
I would expose Fowler.
Yeah. There's no way that you expose Fowler because it's essentially adding a protection slot. But the reason why they're not going to expose Manson, honestly, I wouldn't expose Manson. Here's my reasoning there.
Because you want to trade him.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like Josh Manson has lower trade value than Hayden Fleury does. Or sorry, Josh Manson has higher trade value than Hayden Fleury does. He has higher trade value than Josh Mahura does. And it's not as if Mahura or Hayden Fleury are going to be these game-breaking talents for the Ducks. And so I'd rather keep Josh Manson and then just trade him afterwards to be able to recuperate futures. And the other thing is the Ducks would not expose him they would have traded him if they were planning to expose him.
Yeah, and not to get off the expansion topic, but I do want to just say, because I'm seeing some chatter about the tank in our chat, is that the Ducks didn't try to tank this year either.
No.
they try to be good. Like they went out and signed veterans.
Do we forget that Kevin Shattenkirk said that Bob Murray agreed that it's time for this team to take the step?
Yeah, exactly. So like they didn't try to be bad, and I don't think they're ever going to try to be bad. Or they're never going to like, kind of gear their roster towards the future.
Like I said, Bob Murray has not moved out a player that he likes.
Exactly. And until that happens, it's going to be tough for this team to move forward.
Let me ask you this. What's more likely this offseason? A Josh Manson trade or a Josh Manson extension?
Oh no. Oh no. I am really hurting here.
I'm on the chaotic evil side right now.
What is the chaotic evil side?
I'm just saying, asking that question's chaotic evil.
Oh, well, yeah, I think he gets extended. Or no, I think that's more likely than him getting traded. Based on everything we know about Bob Murray, based on everything that he's done or not done, maybe more importantly, I think it's a likelier that there's an extension.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that the trade won't happen. It just seems like it's more believable to me that Bob Murray will extend Josh Manson, which again is just completely wrong, like is not what they should do, but I could see him doing it.
Real quick, I also want to calm down the narrative of Josh Mahura becoming the next Shea Theodore. Josh Mahura is a good player, but he won't become Shea Theodore.
Well, he hasn't shown, I think because the thing with Shea Theodore is that he was outstanding in the AHL. And Mahura's been good in the AHL, but I don't think he's been to that same level. And in the NHL, I mean, Theodore, even though Theodore did have rough patches in Anaheim, he still, I think, showed more potential than Mahura.
Yeah. And all right, let's end with this question. Actually, the last question. Time Twitch asked us, have we seen the last game for Getzlaf as a Duck?
I don't think so. I think he comes back. Whether it's 1 or 2 years, I think he's back.
Agreed. 100% agreed. So, anything else you want to add?
I just want to say a big thank you to everybody. Mm-hmm. I mean, everybody who's been listening, whether you're and I hear Salem.
Salem was meowing a little bit. She's agreeing with you. Cat. She's agreeing with you.
Yeah, she's thanking everybody. She's joining the chorus. No, but seriously, thanks guys if you've been sticking around since the beginning of this show, or if you've joined on this season or during the COVID break, the last year. Mm-hmm. It's been the last calendar year, from May 9th, 2020 to now has been a wild ride with no Ducks. And then a season that went completely awry for the Ducks. Like
March of last year was when you and I left Anaheim calling to start Crash the Pond.
Exactly. So for everybody that's stuck around or that's come on in the last year, welcome. We appreciate you guys. You guys make this fun. You guys make this awesome. And we're just excited to keep it going. It's going to be a fun summer. We've got the expansion draft and the draft. There's going to be free agency. So there's not going to be a whole lot of downtime here. It's going to be right picking up where we left off.
Yeah. Yeah. And I said it yesterday on Twitter that like a big thank you to all of you and all of you supporting us. I mean, I think the amount of support that we get, not only through Twitch, through Twitter, through our Patreon, through our Discord on Patreon, through everything there, like the amount of support that we get, it's truly mind-boggling to me at times, the amount of people that really kind of enjoy this little show that you and I do. And at the end of the day, we do it because, like, the reason we started doing this is because it's fun. And so we just love hockey, and we love talking about hockey, and we love all the nitty-gritty of it. And so if people are enjoying that along with us, then all the better. Yep. And so we really, really do appreciate everyone that's jumped into the Twitch chat, everyone that's jumped and mentioned us on Twitter, everything like that. But having kind of said all that, there's plenty to come. Don't expect this as a goodbye. We will be back yet again next Sunday. We're going to have plenty of good content for you as we go in. I mean, it's funny because with how bad the Ducks have been the last couple of seasons, the Ducks, like the information, the fun time to follow the team, it's almost as if once the season's over is when the real fun begins. Yeah. Because then we get the draft lottery. Then we get the draft.
Well, also, we don't have to talk about, like, why is Derek Grant getting the most minutes at 5-on-5?
It's basically the most fun is the start of the season. It is the trade deadline, and it's all the time leading up to the draft.
Well, yeah, and even the draft, like last draft we did, and actually both the last 2 drafts, we've done like a live stream. So if you're someone who's been following us on Twitch, like you get a 3-hour stream basically of us reacting. And so like this off season is going to be packed. Like,
yeah,
2 drafts,
And
both impactful.
we should mention this. The goals are going to be playing also still, and we haven't even mentioned this. Zegras, Drysdale, and Mahura were all sent down. The goals play 3 games this week, and then there's the AHL playoffs starting. And so there's going to be a lot to talk about, a lot to cover.
Well, they're not the AHL playoffs. They're
the Pacific Division playoffs.
Tournament. Yeah, something like that. Well, yeah, so Zegras, Drysdale, and Mahura. So, yeah, the goals played twice this week, so I'm going to be watching those games.
Yeah. Yep, and I think you and I are both going to be watching a little bit more actual game film of all the draft-eligible players to have a little bit of a better feel on those guys. So we'll have a little bit more information there.
Yeah, so on that note, I think we're gonna get out of here. So if you want to support the show, if you've been enjoying what we've been doing here this season, there are a few ways to do that, to support us. The biggest way is at patreon.com. That's at patreon.com/crashthepond for $1 a month. You get access to our patrons only Discord chat, which is so much fun. It's really become its own little community in the last year, I would say, of just diehard Ducks fans, hockey fans. So just go check it out. And then for $5 a month, you still get access to that chat. You also get 2 bonus episodes a month. We go more in depth on the Ducks, more in depth on the league, and we will discuss whatever topics the patrons want us to talk about within that chat. And then for $15 a month, this is a big jump, but I think it's worth it. During the season, we do 2 live streams a month, 2 watch-alongs of live Ducks games. So we basically give you like an alternative commentary feed. And during the offseason, not 100% sure yet what we'll do for that tier. We might do like older Ducks games. Maybe we'll do AHL games. Who knows?
The current plan for because we've already done the first watch along of the month. The second one of the month, what we're going to be doing is we're going to do a playoff game of patrons' choosings. And one thing I do want to mention on that tier is that once you get access to that tier, you can actually go back and rewatch any of the watch-alongs that we've done. And so that will typically have a date, and you can click on the link and watch that watch-along if you want to go back and watch it. So there is kind of stuff for you to go back and watch at the watch-along tier if you want to subscribe at that tier.
Yeah, so that's all at patreon.com/crashthepond. Now, if you're not on Patreon, or if, funds are tight or whatever the case may be, it's totally fine. Just search for us on Apple Podcasts. You can leave us a rating and a review there. And if you leave us a review, we will 100% read it on the show. We're also on YouTube. Make sure to subscribe there if you want to see the video version of this, if you want to see all the charts that Jake is throwing into the Twitch stream.
Or see my bright shirt.
Or see Jake's bright shirts, or see Salem the Black Cat, or just whatever else works its way into the feed.
Who knows what's going to pop up on my camera?
Yeah, maybe over the off season, that'll be what I'll work on, is to spice up my video feed. We'll see.
Work on your wardrobe, Felix. Work on your
wardrobe. Like today I'm not wearing a gray shirt. It's not gray this time.
Wow.
That's a big step forward. Okay. Outside of that, goodness, I'm losing my train of thought. Check out our website, crashthepond.com. That's where we'll actually post some takeaways this week from the season. We're going to be posting content there, just written content throughout the off season. It's also where you can find previous shows. Find us on social media. That's at Crash the Pond on Twitter, Crash the Pond on Facebook. Jake is on Twitter at ReindeerGames91, and I am on Twitter at Felix_Sicard. So that will do it for us tonight, guys. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sticking with us during this crazy season. And we'll talk to you next week. Have a good one.
Bye.